Hello, people. Today we're going to focus, the first official topic of this course will be essentially to understand the competitive equilibrium that helps us model and helps us basically do some predictions in economics regarding basically almost any type of industry. And then next week, we will start with the topic on elasticities, and we will discuss later on what that means. You've probably heard many times about the word capitalism, and it's thrown around a lot in different news articles, in op-eds, in debates regarding like political issues and stuff. Let's define capitalism as an economic system that promotes private property and the capacity to use that private property to generate some profits. Basically, every single firm that we know more or less works on this idea. You have some resources, you have some material, you have some endowment, you have something, you have some product, some production process, whatever it is, some intellectual property, some idea, and you use that to basically transform it or something with it in order to generate profits. And the idea of basically of most firms enters into this. So the question here becomes, well, this thing that I described just a couple of seconds ago applies basically to almost any firm in almost any country. Or there are probably millions of examples like this. So essentially, if that is the case, then how do we differentiate countries like the ones described in the slide or mentioned in the slide from each other in economic terms, and not necessarily their history or their political differences, but like, how do you differentiate doing business in all of these countries? If the idea of private property and generating profits, that very simple economic definition could be described for all of them. So do you have any clue what type of thing could we use in economic terms to describe, or sorry, to differentiate these type of countries? The key differentiating factor between all of these economies. In all of these economies, you can do business. You can invest your money in different type of industries. They may have different regulations and laws, and because of that, maybe, maybe you can't invest in this particular industry, but you can on others, and you can export or import or stuff like that. A bunch of business transactions. You can grow. You can acquire other businesses. You can go bankrupt. Like in almost any country, no matter how developed or not developed, how let's call it communist, quote unquote, or how free market it is, you have all of these type of things. But the thing that differentiates them is the degree of market competition that you face in each of these countries. The more competitive a market is, the more options consumers have of buying the same type of product from different brands. And that is huge, because the moment you have a bunch of options, those countries have better welfare in general, because all of those buyers can, well, if they did not receive a quality product or a quality service from one brand, they can change to the other. And the ability of opting for different options is key to finding and satisfying all our different tastes. So market competition is essential to understanding the idea of how markets work. And to understand how markets work, we need to basically define and understand what are the two main components of any market in any industry, in any country. And those are, as you probably already know, the market demand, as you're seeing right now on the slide, which is a downward sloping curve, and I'll describe later on why it's downward sloping. And also a market supply, which is, and normally it's an upward sloping curve, and it represents the side of the producers. The market demand represents the side of the consumers. And a main takeaway to remember here, in order for you to understand and take this for the rest of your life, no matter what you remember from this course, please take this idea. The demand curve represents the particular willingness to pay of consumers for a specific product in that market. Let me re-say that and basically like reiterate this idea. If you are any normal person and you want to buy something, all of you have preferences, tastes for different things. You like different types of goods. And whenever you go to a store or whenever you are searching or browsing on Amazon or any other place where you can buy on e-commerce for a specific product, you're basically comparing the prices of the different alternatives you have for that specific product. So if I want to buy some tennis shoes, I know that in a store I can find Nike tennis shoes, Adidas tennis shoes, Puma tennis shoes, and other brands that are available in the market. And essentially, I'll see the specific characteristics of the shoe I like, the color, the texture, how if it's a running shoe or if it's just a walking one, more of a fashion type statement. And I obviously consider the price. If it's too pricey, if it's actually a good bargain, and you all the time in your mind consider all of these things whenever you're deciding to buy something. So the particular idea of the willingness to pay implies that in your head, whenever you're going to buy something and you go to the store and you think, oh, I want to buy, I need to buy something. Well, you probably have some range, imaginary range, price range in your head in which you say, okay, if I find that I'm looking for a tennis shoe that falls under the 1,000 peso to 1,500 peso range, and anything in between that price range, I'm willing to pay. Obviously, the higher you go, the more satisfied you need to be with the particular product. So the demand curve shows the willingness to pay of consumers. It is a particular curve or line, depending on the model we're using, to essentially describe and depict that particular consumption decision. How willing to pay are the consumers of the Mexico City market for these type of products? And it is a downward sloping curve, as you see in the slide, that it goes from left to right, decreasing in slope, because essentially, look at the axis on the graph. You're graphing a line that compares quantity, the units of a specific good, and the price of that good. Those are the key elements that you consider when you're doing a consumption decision. Obviously, the lower the price, the more units you're willing to buy of that good that you like. So that's why the demand is downward sloping. It goes from left to right and it decreases. As the price decreases and it approaches the origin of that graph, the amount of units you can buy and you're willing to pay, basically, is higher. If a particular good becomes really expensive and the price is much higher, then you're probably willing to pay less units of that good because it's more expensive. And remember that if you spend too much money on one particular good, you're probably affecting the consumption of other goods. That is the idea of the market demand. Questions regarding what I just said? So, market supply, the other side of the story and of the equation. So, market supply, as I was describing earlier, it is an upward sloping curve, as you see on the slide. It goes from left to right increasingly. The slope is increasing. And this happens because the supply side represents the producer side of things, the side of the firms and of the businesses. And depending on the different business decisions, the supply curve is affected. So what you see and what the supply curve models is the particular marginal cost of the firm or that this firm has to produce something, whatever product we're discussing. So in a particular market, when you see the supply curve of that market, you're seeing the marginal cost of production of the different firms that participate in that market. So it could be the particular marginal cost of production of the car market in the Mexico City area. And it represents an increasing slope because in most cases of life, most products, the cost of production increase the more units you produce. Because the more units you produce of something as a firm, you need more inputs. You need to hire more workers. You need to buy more machines. You need a bigger factory. You basically have increasing costs in most industries. And that's why the typical market supply curve is an upward sloping curve that shows and basically depicts that increases in the cost of every single unit. Basically, the marginal cost represents this. Every single unit extra I decide to produce, as you move to the right on the quantity axis, the cost increases. And that cost is reflected in a price that I place in the market. To cover my costs and not lose money, I need to basically, if I produce more and my costs are increasing, I need to basically have higher prices to cover those costs and basically go even or turn a profit. Questions regarding the idea of the market supply?